Guest today. I've been looking forward to it. So I really want to jump in here because this is a guest that I've been waiting to get on the show for quite some time. Here in this situation, most leaders believe the problem is performance. And what Rachel Radway does is argues that it's actually the cost that's working against your wiring. I'm Mick, the Doctor of Digital, and this episode is about why organizations that honor how people think, feel, and process will always outperform environments built on conformity and burnout. At one point, Rachel explains why the biggest barrier in modern leadership isn't skill or strategy, but the invisible tax of making self-suppression and working in systems that punish perceptiveness. And before we talk about Perceptive and the work that Rachel is actually doing, I think this is important to set the ground rules. So with that, I'd like to welcome Rachel to the program and thank you for being on the program. How are you doing today, Rachel?
I'm doing well, Mick. Thank you so much for having me on here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, likewise, and I'm really excited to get you on here because I've mentioned before the show started, I've seen so many things in organizations and some of the limitations there, and that's what I really would like to delve into today because this is really important. So before we talk about this actually really good book, Perceptive, let's work about coaching high-achieving leaders or organizations you've supported. I want to go back a little bit. When you were still inside the corporate world before burnout and leaving to build your own practice, what did you begin to notice about the cost of being perceptive and values-driven leader inside environments that rewarded detachment?
The main thing that I noticed was it was hard. I was going through every day really running two different operating systems. There was the real me inside, and then there was the person that I was putting on, the mask, the persona. And I wasn't aware that I was doing this at the time. I didn't learn this until more recently when I got out of it, but I did it for decades. And I now see that there are thousands and maybe millions of people who are doing this as well. And a lot of them are clients of mine. We are driven. We are loyal to our companies. We are very, very conscientious and want to do the absolute best job that we can possibly do. And we realize that we operate a little bit differently from a lot of the people around us. And I always wanted to be one of those people who could come in at 9 and leave at 5 and leave it all behind and not worry about it. And that just isn't the way that I'm wired. And I would carry it with me, or I wouldn't leave. I would stay until 10 or 11 at night working because I couldn't get everything I needed to get done during the day. And because I didn't have a concept of boundaries and a lot of other reasons. But it was hard. It was fatiguing and exhausting and taxing in a lot of ways.
Got it. So what was the moment that you realized that success in corporate environments often required suppressing gifts like empathy, intuition, and sensitivity?
Honestly, I don't know that there was a moment where I realized it. I think it was one of those in hindsight. When I did burn out, not for the first time, but for a very severe episode of it in 2014. I was a leader at a Fortune 500. I was leading a global team that spanned 17 time zones. I was working all the time. I had no personal life. And it got to the point where I really couldn't function properly anymore. And I realized that what I didn't realize at the time was I had lost my empathy and I had lost my sense of humor.
Okay.
And I had become very, very cynical. And none of that was me. But when you're in it, you don't know you're in it, of course, right? Because you're in survival mode. You're just trying to make things happen and keep going. You're just sort of punching through. So it wasn't until much later when I started researching burnout and learning about neurodivergent burnout, among other things, and looking back at my own experiences that I could really put a name to it. I had no idea what was happening to me at the time.
It's interesting. Your book, Perceptive, has won multiple national awards, so kudos to you. And it's resonated with both leaders and HR professionals. What problem were you trying to solve when you wrote the book?
I think the biggest thing that I was trying to achieve was raise awareness about the fact that workplaces were not designed for the majority of us. They were designed by very few people who tend to think in a very specific kind of way and have very specific goals. And the goals are usually for the business and not for the people.
Sure.
And when I started working as a coach, even though I hadn't necessarily said that I was targeting a certain kind of client, a certain kind of client was drawn to me and was drawn to work with me. And I saw the same kinds of patterns being repeated over and over and over again. And they were all things that I was familiar with from my own experience.
Mm.
And so part of writing the book was to reach more people than I could reach in my business.
Yes.
And to help both the individuals who had suffered like I had and who had spent their lives being given the message that they were doing things wrong or that they didn't fit in, when in fact, some things were designed wrong, right? We could say it that way. And to help them feel validated and learn that they actually they have agency and they have gifts and they're not broken and they're not crazy and they're not alone, which is a really key point. And the other piece of it was to address leaders and people in HR and people teams who have the ability to create cultures and foster cultures and create workplaces and spaces, and to let them know that the way we've been doing things up until now does not work for most people. And here are some of the reasons why it doesn't work. And they're not always what you think, and they're not always visible. And you probably have a lot of really smart, high performers who are unable to bring their best selves to work because of the ways that typical offices and workspaces are set up today.
It brings up an interesting question. It's like who you're writing for. So I'm curious about that. So who are you addressing? That deeply perceptive leader, the burnt out high achiever, or the organizations trying to understand them?
I was really writing for the first group primarily, but the second group was a secondary audience that I was very conscious of. The book has a lot of information for those people in it, but the main people that I wanted to address were the perceptive leaders, the high achievers who had always felt like they didn't fit in and struggled with burnout and other things that they may not have recognized.
So yes, I want to get to the book itself specifically, because this is really helpful to bring this together. So if you had to summarize the core thesis in one or two sentences, what's the argument that Perceptive makes that most leadership books miss?
First of all, that we all have gifts. We all have superpowers. They are the other side of the coin of the challenges. As humans, we're wired to focus on the challenges, the things that we struggle with. But every one of us has gifts. And those of us who are wired a little bit differently have all kinds of leadership assets that are often pushed aside or not allowed to blossom and flourish and lead. Mm. And when we start to embrace and leverage those gifts, A, we can overcome some of the challenges a lot more easily. And B, we can start creating and fostering workplace cultures that help everyone thrive and that are ultimately making the businesses more successful as well as the individual employees.
So I'd like to dive into that a little bit more. So one of the central claims in Perceptive is that traits like empathy, intuition, and deep processing are not liabilities, they're leadership assets. So how does that play out in the real workplaces?
So one of the things that I see all the time, the leaders I work with, managers, directors, vice presidents at various companies of various sizes, different industries, These leaders often have struggled throughout their careers with things like being heard and being recognized by senior leadership, by executives. They often get to a certain point and they've been successful, and they can't get past that point because they often see, for example, why certain strategic business decisions that are being made are not going to work out the way people think they're going to. They have an ability to connect the dots and to see several steps ahead, but they don't always have data-backed evidence to, to justify their claims. So people don't want to hear them. They don't want to listen. Intuition isn't something that is given a lot of credence in our work culture today, in our society. And intuition comes strongly with this constellation of traits that I talk about. And yet, despite all of these struggles that these leaders deal with on a regular basis, they are some of the most beloved in their companies. They consistently get positive feedback from their direct reports and from some of their colleagues who understand how much empathy goes into their leadership and the work that they do every day, and who know how much they care about their employees and their employees' growth and development and mental health and state of mind. A lot of the work that I sometimes have to do with these clients is helping them create more boundaries and separate their own, they have so much empathy that they have trouble separating themselves from their employees. And I know that that was something that I dealt with, years ago when I was still in corporate. Did that answer the question?
It does. And because I wanted to pick up on one of the things you said. I mean, you're working with people now, and so you've coached and interviewed deeply perceptive leaders across the industries, as you mentioned. What
Mhm.
patterns show up again and again, regardless of the title or the function?
So I've already referred to some of them. I think there are a lot of common traits. So one of them is that empathy, which is it's just there. It's just part of who we are. Self-empathy isn't always, and that's something that a lot of the leaders that I work with struggle with sometimes. Intuition, again, just being able to connect dots and being able to see several steps ahead. It is a gift in strategic thinking and strategic planning. A lot of the people I work with are systems thinkers. They have a unique ability to see both the big picture and the details, which is unusual because most people are kind of either or. It's not something that you see together. But having the two of them come together is so valuable in anything where you are overseeing large initiatives, where you have to see the big picture and understand the ultimate goals and be able to communicate them. And you also have to understand how all of the details fit together and what's needed and how they contribute to the whole and how individual people's roles feed into that. Just noticing things that other people don't often notice, being able to read the room, sensing energies, knowing what people need to hear, being able to lead a meeting and understand the unspoken things that are going on is incredibly important. And especially in environments like today, where there's so much, this VUCA world that we talk about, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. You need these people who can see below the surface and are looking deeper and making connections and reading rooms and getting the people that they're working with, and those people see it and respond to it.
And this has a lot to do with corporate culture. So one of the things I was curious about then, corporate culture often rewards speed, certainty, and performance. What do leaders underestimate about the cost of masking, overfunctioning, or ignoring their neurobiology?
Well, that's the thing. I think some of them ignore it. I think some of them don't even realize that that's happening because it's all happening below the surface, and so many leaders are still not aware of it. And that's both leaders who have these traits and leaders who are leading people who have these traits who are not aware of it. Speed is a great example. A lot of the people I work with, because they are processing things so deeply, and also, by the way, processing more. So one of the things that's true about neurodivergent brains, we have fewer filters in terms of what is coming in consciously and subconsciously. So we are actually processing more information constantly than other brains. And I'm going to use air quotes here and say neurotypical, because I don't actually believe that such a thing exists, but we are processing more and more deeply than other brains. So of course that takes more time and more energy and more fuel. Speed, there's the triple constraint that project managers, the triangle that project managers deal with, which is, I think it's cost, speed or schedule, and quality. And there are different ways of using that framework. But you can't, when you want both speed and quality, or speed and depth, something is going to have to give a little bit. It's rare to be able to get both of those things. So leaders have to make a choice. Do you want real, and do you want good, or do you want fast? And they have to decide what fast is actually going to get them in the long run. Is fast actually going to get you the results that you're looking for your team and for the company?
I'd like to talk about the impact a little bit too. So what impact has the book had so far, either from readers, HR leaders, or organizations adopting a lens? Any surprising stories, shifts, or responses?
I wouldn't say surprising. I would say really gratifying and fulfilling. And I'm just so thrilled with the responses that I've received. And it's the individual stories that make the biggest difference to me. That, someone will come to me and tell me, I read your book and I feel seen for the first time in my life.
Nice.
Or it feels like you were inside my brain when you were writing this. And I have never felt that before. And I have never been able to talk to people about this. There are people who are sharing it with their daughters and their families and their sisters and their, cousins, because because these traits are genetic, and families deal with these issues all the time and don't realize that they are dealing with them. There are a lot of women in particular in midlife who are learning now that they are neurodivergent. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes it's because their kids are being diagnosed for the first time,
right,
and they are recognizing signs in themselves. One of the things that I didn't learn until after I published the book, actually, was that the hormonal shifts that we experience in midlife and beyond can exacerbate traits that we have had all our lives that we were able to mask before and no longer can, which is why I was diagnosed with ADHD in my early 50s. I didn't just suddenly develop ADHD. I've had it all my life.
Sure.
But I'm smart and high functioning, and I was a good student, and I didn't misbehave. And so there was no reason for anybody to take me to get assessed. What would I have been assessed for at that time? Because we didn't understand what it looks like. Now, learning more about what ADHD looks like and what autism can look like and what all of these other traits can look like and how they can inform each other and how they can conflict each other, I can see so many things in my past that are now explained that weren't before. And that's something that I'm hearing from a lot of readers of the book as well.
It almost sounds like one of the questions I said, surprising, but this is a little bit more surprising because you're discovering something. So,
true. This is true. Yes. I'd forgotten about that part, but
that's a good idea though. How it came back. And so it came to you. I'm curious, a little bit of shift here. Let's talk about the craft. So what did your writing process actually look like? Was it structured, or did you have to fight your own wiring and burnout patterns to get it out?
I definitely had to fight some of my own patterns. It wasn't necessarily the burnout so much. So I was approached initially by a hybrid publisher, and when I split from them ultimately, but in the first part of my work, they had a structured way to help authors start writing. So there was a cohort of authors, and we were all working at the same time. And I had a sort of a writing coach who was working with me, who was kind of setting deadlines for at least chunks of the book and for concepts and themes and things like that. I have been a writer all my life, and I have contributed to other books before. This was my first solo book, so this was a much bigger effort.
Sure.
I don't usually have a problem getting my thoughts out on paper, writing. One of my challenges as an author is that I'm also an editor, and I spent decades working professionally in editorial roles. So I am, and I think this has a lot to do with my wiring as well. I have these tendencies toward perfectionism and, things that are kind of all connected. So I am constantly editing myself as I write. And what most writers and writing coaches, in fact, probably all, recommend is that you just write a shitty first draft. You just get it out there to make sure that you've got what you want to say and that it forms a cohesive whole. Then you go back and you edit, and you can do that, many times. But that was one of my biggest challenges. It wasn't really meeting the deadlines or saying what I wanted. It was stopping myself from editing myself so much that I was able to get everything out.
You mentioned that hybrid, and then you didn't work that way. So I'm curious, what was your publishing path, a traditional hybrid and indie, and then what informed your ultimate decision?
I'm not going to go into details because there was I didn't like the way the company operated and what I got for the money that I had invested. And so I decided that I needed to take a different route, and ended up finding a company that is amazing, that I introduced to a lot of authors and potential authors, who their focus is really on book marketing and promotion, but they have a production arm with people who've been in the publishing industry for many, many years and are experts in what they do. So I had full sort of creative control, but I worked with a cover designer who was absolutely amazing, really, really talented. And I worked with, I had a project manager, and I worked with somebody who was a typesetter in the publishing industry. And so it was a partnership to get it published. And it looks like any traditional publisher might have put the book out. And that company now has a hybrid publishing arm, but they didn't at the time that I was making my decision.
So how should you had co-authored or went on other multiple author project before? So how would you now, with your experience for first-time nonfiction authors, think about that publisher selection, distribution, and awards, especially someone who had, as you did, wrote from lived experience?
I think it really depends on what your goals are. There's a lot to think about before you write a book. I mean, it can sound daunting. Some people think it sounds easy. It's not easy, I can tell you that much. It really depends on what your goals are. I spoke with someone recently who wants to get a book out because she wants her ideas out there in the world, and she wants it as a, it can help boost visibility, and it can help be sort of a calling card to bring people to your other business, whatever you do. There are some people, though, who don't want to spend the time actually writing the book. You can get help for that. You can hire a ghostwriter or someone who is, more partnering with you and co-writing, co-authoring the book with you. There are different ways to get the book published. You can try to go the traditional route. That's getting harder and harder to do. And you don't own the rights to your work at the end of it. Whereas with, self-publishing or hybrid publishing or some of the other models that are out there now, you can get 100% of the royalties, and you can decide, what you want to do with that book and where you want it distributed and how. So I think there are a lot of questions to ask yourself about what you're looking for and why. And then there are a lot of different ways to address it. And I'm always happy to talk with authors who are interested in the process.
And this has to do with some other things, but distributing, really. So your work sits at the intersection of leadership, neurodivergence, mental health, and culture. What's actually worked for getting Perceptive into the hands of the right readers?
Honestly, Mick, I'm still working on that. It was tough for me to pick. One of the things you have to do is choose what categories your book falls under. And you have to do that. Awards wants you to do that, and Amazon wants you to do that, and the other places where you distribute your book want you to do that. And that was tough for me because, as you mentioned, it crosses a lot of fields. It's not a traditional leadership book. It's not a traditional self-help book. So I had to be a little creative, and honestly, I went with my intuition, and it seems to be working so far. I would love to get it out there into more hands, but at least the way that I'm talking about it seems to be getting attention. So,
well, many authors chase visibility, but you focused on credibility and inclusion. How do you design believability instead of hype?
How do you design believability instead of hype? Can you reframe your question?
Yes, I think it's saying you really had a serious topic and you didn't just put it out there to pump it up, but you were actually talking about something really serious, and that's harder to do, which is where your distribution model, it doesn't fit a certain category.
True. And it's funny because I do, every once in a while I come across a book that really just isn't a serious book. It's like
Sure.
somebody just wanted the visibility, as you're talking about. And I think I don't know how to do that. It's just not in me to do that. I think it's just about being authentic. The book is an authentic piece of me. It came from me, and it's the only way that I know how to do things. And I think that the people it was meant to draw in get that. They see that and they feel it. And it's, the universe works in mysterious ways, and energy draws energy, and the right people are finding it.
And I think that authenticity, I think that is really a key. And that's what I was kind of striving for. And that's pretty much what you said it. So we do want to get that message out there to those people who are listening. Could you put this on a sentence to say, what would you want to say for every corporate leader, HR executive? What would it say about the book in a sentence?
If you want to learn how to better support all of your employees and not just some of them, and foster a workplace culture that helps all employees feel engaged and included and like they can bring their best selves to work, you need to understand more about neurodiversity. It just is. It's not something you can choose to accept or not. It's here. It's in your organization, and you need to learn more about it.
That does make a whole lot of sense. And I've certainly got a lot out of it because I can relate so much to what you're saying, and being in organizations, both as an employee and an employer, and being a manager of other human beings. So for listeners today and the message resonated, where should they start? Should they go to the book, to your coaching, the content, a community? Where and how do they get a hold of you?
So lots of options. The first thing I'll say, we haven't even said the name of the book. The book is called Perceptive, Insights for Leaders Who Feel More, Process Deeply, and Think Differently. And the book is available on my website, which is rercoaching.com. It's also available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, and pretty much bookshop.org. Wherever your favorite bookshop is, you can find Perceptive there. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And I'm Rachel Radway on LinkedIn. There aren't very many of us, and you'll see the one who is a leadership and executive coach. And I do offer, as you mentioned, different services. So I offer one-to-one coaching. I have a group called the Grit Collaborative, and GRIT is an acronym for Grace, Resilience, Intuition, and Trust, which are the 4 cornerstones of the program. It's a mastermind program for women specifically who identify as highly sensitive, wired differently, neurodivergent, and are looking for a small, supportive community of other smart professional women who deal with similar issues.
Well, trying to get the message out there, and it's an important one, the book, but is there anything that you would wish more leaders understood about being wired differently, and what is the means for performance and well-being?
What I wish leaders understood is it is so much more common than any of us
Yeah.
used to think. Some of the statistics that are out there say that, oh, maybe 15 to 20% of the population is neurodivergent. I disagree. And most of the neurodivergent advocates and leaders that I know also disagree. I think that number is much, much, much higher, exponentially higher. No two brains are the same. Every brain is different, which means that designing one system or one process or one tool for everybody is never going to work. And understanding more about the individuals in your organization is going to help your company, first of all, with innovation, with raising the bottom line, with just success in any way that you measure it. There's just it's the people that make your company successful, and your people can't be successful until you understand who they are and what they need.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate your time. Fascinating book. I wish everybody to run out and get it, but also been looking forward to coming on and interacting a bit and getting some answers that are really necessary for corporate culture. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I learned a lot, and I think the audience benefited tremendously as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, Mick. I really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. If you want to be able to pick up books like this and important ideas, make sure you keep listening to the Doctor of Digital podcast. I do have a couple of volumes on myself on Amazon, Burning America and On Track, Ian Hunter. And of course, I want to thank the publishers of those works for their support of the program. If you want to reach out to me directly, that is Write the Book, Grow the Business on LinkedIn, G. Mick, the Doctor of Digital Smith, PhD. And of course, listen to the Doctor of Digital podcast and also subscribe. Until next time, thanks for listening. Deus Volt.